Hey guys, how's it going? This is the next video in my computer build series. In this build, I'm going to be showing off the core components I use in my system. Now, I could have made separate videos on each one, but all these parts pretty much go together. That's why I decided to make one video on it. So I'm just going to go over basically the motherboard I used, the CPU I used, the RAM, and then I'll talk a little bit about this cooler I have on the top here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and talk about why I chose the parts I did from a beginner's perspective, I guess, and kind of just go through each part, why I chose it. Starting off with the motherboard, this is the Gigabyte GA-Z77-HD3, and this is an overclockable motherboard, which I'll go over in a second. But basically, the HD3 stands for you got HD, three different types of connectors. So you got a VGA, DVI, HDMI. I got a little cover on here, but that is HDMI. And I'm going to go ahead and go over all the other connectors. You got a PS2, two USB 2.0s, two USB 3.0s, another USB, or two USB 2.0s. You got your Ethernet, and then your audio connectors right there. So that's going to be your external connectors you have for this motherboard. And I'm going to go ahead and move it over to this side, and I'm going to go ahead and go over the RAM I picked. This is going to be really basic, crucial DDR3 8 gigabytes of RAM. I got two 4 sticks here, as you can see from the side. I have two more expansion slots there, so I can actually expand if I want, but I just went with 8 gigabytes right now. Going down to this side, you got your SATA connectors, and this is going to be where you plug in your hard drives. So you got you got two SATA 3 connectors, and these are capable of 6 gigabits per second. So if you're using an SSD, which I am, you're going to want to use the faster white ports. And the blue ones are SATA 2, which are going to be a little slower. But if you're using a mechanical hard drive, this is what you would plug those into, because you're not going to be able to take advantage of the faster speeds anyway. Now this is an ATX motherboard, which is going to stand for the size. So I do got two PCI Express slots here where I can put external graphics cards. I got two older PCI and then little 1-slot PCIs. And basically, if you get a smaller size motherboard, you're not necessarily going to sacrifice speed, but you are going to lose some of these options for expandability. So if you want to use, maybe more than one graphics card, this is what you would use that for. Also sound cards. If you're going to use Wi-Fi, you can get Wi-Fi cards. So just keep in mind, depending on what you want to do with your system. Now, as you can see, this is a Z77 Intel board, which means I got an Intel processor. So under here, under all this big cooler right here, you're going to have Intel 3570K. I decided to go with this processor because it's one of the faster processors. It's a quad-core processor clocked at, I believe, 3.8 gigahertz is what it turbos to. And the K at the end of the processor means it is overclockable. Now, there is non-overclockable versions of this, and if you went with that, then you might as well not go with the Z77 motherboard, because if you're not going to have an overclockable processor, you might as well not have an overclockable motherboard. But that's why I went with those two. You got an overclockable motherboard and an overclockable processor, so you can kind of mess with that. The reason I'm building my home computer is obviously for customization, to be able to do what I want with it. That's why I went with the overclockable option. You can definitely go with a little bit of a cheaper motherboard that doesn't have the overclockability, and then also you can go with a processor that doesn't have that ability, and you'll save a little bit of money. But if you do want to kind of customize it and tweak it how you want, then you do have that option. So I'm going to talk about this big cooler here, and you might say, why do you need a cooler that big? This is the Cooler Master 212 Hyper 212 Evo, and if you are going to do overclocking, you have to know that the processor is going to get hotter than it would be if you don't overclock. and the Intel cooler they give you really isn't that great. Now, it is smaller than this, keep that in mind, and if you are going to be using a smaller case, or you do decide to go with like a smaller motherboard and you have a smaller case, just keep in mind the clearance you have for your case, because this is a really big cooler. You have a 120mm fan on the side there, so it is going to give you pretty good air cooling, but you know, it is pretty bulky. However, you do have a 120mm fan mounted to this cooler, so you are going to get really good cooling. I've been able to get temperatures at base clock to about room temperature, which is really pretty good. So if you are going to be doing some overclocking and you want a better cooling option, definitely check out this cooler. It's one of the most popular ones. Everybody that's used it, most everybody likes it. It's the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo, and I've had great luck with it. It is a little harder to install, but I think it's worth it. So to summarize this video, first you're going to have to decide if you want to go with Intel or AMD. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. I went with Intel, and because of that I went with an Intel motherboard. So just keep that in mind when you're deciding what you want to buy. RAM should be pretty easy. Just make sure you get the right stuff and you get the right size. It should be pretty easy to find. I just got some basic Crucial RAM. There's no heat spreaders or anything special. It's just simple RAM. It works. Also keep in mind, if you want to expand for graphics cards, sound cards, Wi-Fi cards, whatever, keep that in mind and then decide what size of motherboard you need and how many expansion slots you need. Also, you might want to keep in mind external connectors. Different motherboards, maybe if you get a little bit of a cheaper one, aren't going to come with, like, for example, USB 3.0, might not come with like HDMI, just a few things like that. Just keep that in mind. Also, another thing that's going to determine the price is the SATA ports it has on your motherboard. This one has two 6 gigabit per second SATA 3 ports, and it has 4 SATA 2 ports. So just keep that in mind too. If you want to use a SSD, it's smart to get a motherboard with SATA 3 so you can get that faster connection speed and you'll get faster data performance. So guys, I hope this video helped you. Maybe if you're a beginner and you're kind of trying to see what you need to think about and what you need to buy, I hope this helped you out a little bit. If you did enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video when I talk about the power supply I chose.